Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Katie Pigden, the editor of the publication. I'm delighted you can join us for today's episode, which forms part of a special series with financial planner Chanelle Pattinson. Last year, Chanelle launched her own podcast, Her Future Bright, in which she interviews inspiring women in financial services. Money Marketing is proud to have partnered with Chanelle for the second series. Each week, Chanelle will be finding out about her guests' careers, their achievements, and how they are bringing the profession forward. As Money Marketing's strapline proudly states, financial advice matters. We want to show the world of advice can be a fulfilling career choice. For any aspiring planners and advisors listening, we hope this series helps you make the leap. And if you're looking for more information, visit our Financial Advisor to Be resource on the Money Marketing website. Now it's over to you, Chanelle.
Hey everyone, I'm Chanelle Pattinson and this is the Her Future Bright podcast, where I interview inspiring women in finance. We talk about their careers, their achievements, and how they are bringing our profession forward. On this week's show, we have Sonia Rach. Hey Sonia, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, I am good, thank you. I'm very excited to have this conversation. I know we've had a couple of conversations from different places before, haven't we? So yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. So for anyone who doesn't know Sonia, she is a senior reporter at FT Advisor, which is part of the Financial Times. So to start things off, could you please tell us a bit about your career so far?
Yeah, sure. So initially, when I began in the world of journalism, it was kind of as an editorial assistant for this HR publication called HR Grapevine. The editor there actually went to the University of Hertfordshire, which is where I went, and he was kind of came in for a careers fair one day, and I just got chatting to him, and he offered me kind of this role as soon as I basically finished. So I started that role quite soon after basically finishing, like submitting my last piece of work and my assignment. So it was a bit crazy. But it was based in Welwyn Garden City, and the drive on the M25 was just horrendous, not the most pleasant. So I decided that I'd kind of look for a role in London because I thought it'd be a bit easier to commute because I live here. And so I started kind of looking for roles. I joined this company, a publication called Reward Guide, which is part of Newspress Specialist Media, and it was kind of still HR related topics. So it was kind of the same as what I'd been doing, but it did kind of have some overlap with the sister publication of that, which was called Pensions Insight. That's kind of where my interest in finance sort of began, because I started writing a little bit about pensions, but more around auto-enrollment and more like consumer focused. And then I basically decided that I liked the world of finance, which probably not many would say, but I found it quite interesting. And then I basically applied for a role at Portfolio Advisor kind of on a whim, just to see what it was like. And then I got offered the role. So I landed in the world of investment and funds and asset managers, and then moved from there to money marketing and now at FT Advisor.
Amazing. So did you always want to be a reporter? Is that what you went to uni to do?
Yeah, well, to be honest, no and yes, because all I kind of knew was that I was good at writing at school, and so I wanted to do something that I guess I was good at rather than something I had to work really hard to be good at. I did try work experience in a law firm prior to applying to university, but I just realised it wasn't really one for me. So then I ended up doing an English Lit degree with journalism. So yeah, I guess you could say I kind of always knew I was going to do something in journalism, but I guess there was kind of that fear at the back of my mind of like, am I going to do this or am I going to do something else? So yeah, probably yes and no, which doesn't really answer your question.
No, it does. I do. I get that. And I guess going into that sort of that industry, that world, like there's so many ways you could go with it, isn't there? Like I'm sure you didn't expect when you started to be a reporter in finance, I wouldn't have thought.
No, definitely not. I thought I wanted to do fashion, and I actually tried it. I did do a bit of fashion journalism and did like London Fashion Week and stuff like that, which was really fun. But again, I guess it just didn't, for me, wasn't something that came very naturally, but also something that I think I enjoyed it more as a hobby rather than kind of a career path. And I just wasn't finding it as stimulating personally, because I wasn't kind of learning new things. Whereas in the world of finance, I obviously was clueless at first. So I kind of had to learn on the job, which I think I work better at things where I'm challenged rather than kind of comfortable.
Yeah, and I think in the world of finance, it's never going to end learning new things, because I think I've accepted now for the rest of my life, I will be learning new things nearly every day.
Yeah, it's true. There's always something, and everything is just jargon heavy, isn't it? So it makes it even harder. The most basic of things is like really complicated.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. And so when I was sort of looking into your career and your studies and stuff like that, I saw that you completed an exchange program at Stony Brook University in Long Island, New York. I'd love to work or study in New York. I think it's maybe a bit late for study. I don't think I'm going to be doing that, but you never know, it might work out there. But I was interested to sort of know how this sort of impacted your career, how it impacted you. Yeah, what it was like.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, never say never. You never know. Yeah. You might
Absolutely.
End up going. But I think, yeah, for me, it was the best year of my life, without a doubt, to be honest.
Wow.
The experience of kind of, I mean, I was studying there, so obviously wasn't working, but the experience of kind of American university is so different to British culture and kind of what we would be used to going to uni here. And it was just amazing to kind of be a part of it and experience some of the things that you often see in movies, and you're like, oh my god, this happens in real life. I kind of didn't know that was a thing. So yeah, it was amazing. And then I also made some kind of lifelong friends who I'm still in contact with. Some of my best friends live there now, so that's really amazing. And kind of when I was studying there, actually, I did do American journalism, so I did American law, and just to kind of experience what studying to be a journalist was like in New York versus kind of London.
Wow.
I spent a day at CBS and the New York Times, which is really, really cool. It was obviously like as a student, so we got shown around and kind of saw how things work. And obviously being in New York City itself was just the icing on the cake. Like, oh, we're in the city, we're in Times Square. And I also met my husband during this year abroad, who's actually from London, so that's another story. But yeah, so all in all, I think it was just kind of the year of like so many different experiences and meeting so many people, and definitely one I would highly recommend to anyone that can do it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I was going to say, if somebody has this sort of opportunity, would you say go for it? Because I think it's quite scary, isn't it? Like, I think I say I'd love to go, but if someone said to me, you can go tomorrow for a year, I'd be like, oh, that's quite scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is scary, and it is so petrifying, like, to do. I think I don't have any family in America. I didn't know one single person in the States when I moved there, and I moved by myself. So the first, we had to go 2 weeks prior to some of the kind of local American students. So international students had to go 2 weeks earlier for orientation and just kind of getting to know stuff. And for some reason, I was obviously unlucky and ended up in a really nice apartment that I'd like, which was like the halls equivalent. But it was kind of an apartment where you share the kitchen space and stuff, kind of like you do in halls. But there were meant to be 3 other people, and the 3 other people didn't turn up for 2 weeks. And then one person turned up after the 2 weeks, and actually ended up being just me and her for the whole year. So we had a spare bedroom for when everyone came to visit and stuff, which is amazing. Yeah. But for 2 weeks, I basically cried because I wanted to go back home, but I couldn't go back home because I basically told my parents I really wanted to go. So I was like, no, I'm loving it. That's great. And then I was calling my sister, like crying my eyes out, like, I hate it here. I don't know anyone. But so I think if you do it, stick it out, because I did and it was great. But yeah, it's a bit scary at first.
Yeah. Oh, that is funny. But it sounds like everything else that came out of it sounds pretty amazing. Like going to the New York Times, meeting your husband, and that's just crazy in itself, being over there and meeting him, and then you both being from London, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Crazy. So go back to journalism. So you've done it for about 6 years now. So what is it that you love about the job?
That's a good question. I think probably the fact that every day is different. So we all kind of naturally have our kind of beats and sections that we work on, and mine's heavily focused around regulation and just the advice market in general. But I think the most interesting thing about being a journalist is that you're speaking to different people every day about different topics, and I just love that, because no day, although kind of every day is the same in the sense that you write X number of stories, it's not the same in the sense that what I'm writing about, who I'm speaking to, kind of whether it's a hard-hitting news story or if it's something a bit more kind of tame, it kind of varies. So that's quite nice, because every day is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you mentioned that you crossed over with like the pension side of things, and that sort of sparked your interest a little bit. So could you tell us a bit more about sort of how it actually went down? Like, did you just start doing a bit of it and then you really liked it, then you got into it? Tell us a bit more.
Sure, yeah, no, so I was writing obviously for Reward Guide, which was a HR publication, and then there was a bit of overlap with me writing about auto enrollment. So Pensions Expert, which is a pensions publication, would kind of copy over some of the stuff, and I ended up writing for them. And then when I applied for the role at Portfolio Advisor, I basically joined and was like, I don't know anything about the world of investment. And it was more of one of those things where you just kind of learn on the job and kind of figure it out, I guess. And I think when I moved to Portfolio Advisor, I ended up in the deep end of funds and investing and asset managers, and it was all very jargon heavy. But yeah, that's kind of what made me, I guess, a bit more interested in the subject matter, and just the fact that I was kind of constantly learning was something I really enjoyed. And that's basically what I did while I was at Portfolio Advisor until I moved over to money marketing.
Yeah. And was that hard? That must have been quite difficult going in and writing about, because sometimes I find it hard enough being in the industry and reading about it. And sometimes it's stuff I even, like, say I do know, but I don't maybe know the real details of it. Sometimes I even find that hard. So going into a role where actually you don't know loads about, I suppose, the subject matter, was that difficult? Was it hard to learn on the job?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at first, to be honest, it was very, very hard. And when I joined Portfolio Advisor, like I said, I didn't have a clue about kind of anything in that space. It was so new to me. And I was very honest about that, even in my interview. You know, I stated, I don't know anything. So you kind of sure you want to employ me? But I think I was quite lucky that I had like a great manager, an editor, and a team that kind of reassured me that it was the same for everyone when they first started into this space, because it was so jargon heavy. And they gave me kind of the support of telling me, you know, what books to read, what sites to look at that would kind of explain things a bit better. And then within a few months, I guess because I was doing it every day, I had a good idea of what it kind of was. And I think, yeah, the biggest issue there is so much jargon at first, and it's quite difficult and overwhelming, but kind of, yeah, sorry. So yeah, at first, to be honest, yeah, it was really hard. And when I joined Portfolio Advisor, I kind of didn't have a clue about funds or asset managers or advisors or anything kind of in this world. But I was really lucky because I had a great editor, a manager, and the team kind of reassured me that it was the same for everyone when they first start. So I think that made it a little bit easier. They kind of gave me the support of telling me what books to read or what sites would kind of break things down a bit more. And then within a few months, I think I had a good grasp of it. But yeah, at first, the biggest issue was the fact that there was just so much jargon. So it's it's difficult and overwhelming, but once you get your head around it, it makes it a lot easier to understand for sure.
Yeah, and it's possible, like you said, like it's confusing at first, and like we said, I just think we're all learning. Like, yeah. If I turn around tomorrow and wanted to be a journalist in finance, which I did, I always wanted to be a journalist when I was younger. It's what I was always determined I was going to do. Yeah, I always wanted to do it. And even there would definitely be topics I'd cover. I'd have, not a clue, because it's such a broad range of things you can talk about in this world. And also it is very complicated. The jargon, everything about it is just quite complicated, isn't it?
No, it really is.
But amazing. So since you've been in the industry and you write about it, you cover lots of different areas, how have you seen it change over the years?
So I think probably the fact that social media has kind of come into play, and I just feel like that has almost taken over a lot of that kind of space. And just, a lot of people using blogs and things like that to almost talk about finance. And that's, I think, on par with some of the financial journalism. So it's doing really well out there, I think. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen change. And also just, I guess, the reporting, because now that we're kind of having a lot more younger people coming into this space and just joining the industry, you almost have to make sure that it's catered to kind of the new people joining, as well as the older generation who have been doing it for so many years. So yeah, I think it's kind of finding that balance we're seeing is kind of the biggest change.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so true about social media. I feel like when I started my career sort of like 6-7 years ago, there was nothing online. Like Instagram was like barely off the ground, and if it was photos of yourself or your dog or a pretty country view. It was definitely not like financial education, but now when you start looking, there's loads of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy to think that even for us now, like as a journalist, I often get my news from Twitter, and it's just so bizarre to think that that's kind of a stream of news, but it is, because you see something trending and you're like, oh, what's going on there? And then you read and you find out things that I probably don't even see on mainstream news outlets. So yeah, it is quite crazy to think, and also scary, because it's the power of social media now, that there are kind of so many pages and sites out there which are great, but then there's also some that aren't so great and aren't legitimate or just very good. So yeah, I think it's a bit scary.
Yeah, no, definitely. And have you found, so like the companies you work for, so FT and like money marketing, are they really starting to take like social media and stuff on board? Are they aware that this is life now, like this is what we got to do?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you see more and more firms that are kind of hiring social media experts or kind of social media assistant, and it's within, I guess, the marketing space. You see a social media role go kind of up, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's an area they're expanding in. So I think more and more companies are noticing that that's something they're going to need to invest in, I guess, in order to keep up.
Yeah, crazy. It is crazy. Amazing. So you are currently studying for your CII, which is Chartered Insurance Institute, diploma in regulated financial planning. So tell us a bit about why you decided to do these exams, and also sort of what it means for your day-to-day role.
Yeah, sure. So this is something that I guess the CII offers, and I just thought it made sense to do. I mean, I write financial advisors, financial planners every single day, who are obviously experts in this field, but I just thought having a bit more of an in-depth understanding for myself, or kind of being able to see these things from the same lens as, I guess, an advisor or a financial planner, just will probably make me a better journalist, because I'll be able to pick up on things that they would pick up on without them kind of having to come to me. And essentially that's kind of what we're here for, right? To be a voice for advisors, or for the relevant readership, whoever that may be. So yeah, I just thought having that qualification under my belt would just help. And then if nothing else, it will hopefully give me some financial knowledge of my own to manage my finances. So yeah, it's a win-win, and it makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how have you found doing it? Have you found like a lot of the stuff you've written about and that kind of thing, has it tied into, like, are you reading the books and being like, oh yeah, like I've written about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think so I, especially things like, I think, inheritance tax or stuff like that I think we write about because it's relevant to advisors that are dealing with their clients, or understanding protection or stuff like that. I'm currently doing RO5, which is the protection one, and so I just see a lot of these things that are coming up, and I'm like, oh, that's quite interesting, because I read about that, or I just studied about that. So it's quite nice that there's an overlap in terms of what I'm writing about as well as what I'm studying, rather than it being kind of two completely different fields.
Definitely. And how have you found studying again? Because I'm guessing, have you studied since uni?
No, so no. it's been hard. I mean, I did RO1 really quickly last year, but mainly because there was a lockdown, obviously, and like
there's nothing else to do,
didn't have much to do. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll just spend my time studying. I feel like I've accomplished something during lockdown. And then I started doing RO5 basically as things started opening, and it was kind of, I started RO5 up again after I moved jobs, and so it's just been a bit hard to manage, but I really do want to get it done this year, so I'm trying really hard to get it. But yeah, managing the time to do it and being able to do it is quite hard. At the FT, our hours are set roughly 7:38 to 3:34 in the afternoon. So I finish quite early, which is nice. But then because you've been up so early, your brain's kind of dead at that point. So I often just put my headphones in and walk around the garden trying to like study, and then stop for the rest of the day. So yeah, it's not terrible, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, I get that. If I can, I try and study in the morning, because and I think it's probably when you're doing the same topic that you maybe do all day, I think maybe sometimes it's harder because you get to the end of the day and you think, I can't put any more of that information in my brain.
Yeah.
So it is, I think studying and working at the same time is very difficult, but I'm sure you'll definitely get there with RO5. And your husband is also studying to be a financial advisor, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And together you started an Instagram page called Making Financial Sense, and I will leave a link below so you can find that. So tell us a bit more about this, how he decided to do these qualifications and why you started the Instagram.
Yeah, so basically the idea kind of came about because of some of our friends and family. So obviously once they kind of heard I was sitting the exam, he was sitting the exams, and also the fact that I write about this stuff every day, we were just kind of getting a lot of our cousins and friends asking us like, what should we do with our money, especially because so many people had so many savings over lockdown accumulated. And obviously we're not regulated to give any advice, and we can't give advice. So we just found ourselves kind of having the same conversation with this kind of same family members and same people, just explaining, what's inflation and why do you need to invest? What's a robo-advisor? And it wasn't until actually one family member that was like, why don't you just like do like a weekly email just to like family and friends explaining like what's happening in the news that week, or just something topical, or something that will kind of educate us and someone that they can rely on, because obviously they're family, so they trust our opinion. And then we were like, that sounds like a lot of work and not sure we're gonna be adding much value, so we didn't know. But we then decided that we'd start this Instagram page called Making Financial Sense, as a way that we thought kind of might help people understand finance and economics a bit better, and just like some of the stuff going on, like with the budget next week, or anything like that, breaking it down as to like what it means to the average person who isn't in the industry. And I think it kind of comes on to the topic of, I guess, the advice gap, and how we're kind of not taught enough about this at school. And so now, being the age of social media and internet, people are kind of turning to Google and Instagram and places where they can get information about what to do with their money. And so we just thought, there are loads of people out there already doing it, and there are also people, like I said, that aren't doing it, or kind of aren't doing it well because they're scams, or just kind of loads of fraudulent activity going on. So yeah, we just decided we'd do it. Hopefully it's useful to people, but yeah, it's more just kind of our way, I guess, of trying to help this advice gap. And even if it's just for our family and friends, it's fine. So yeah,
amazing. I do, and I always think with these sorts of things, like, it is a brilliant page. I was looking at it earlier, and like the videos and stuff, but it's nice. Things like, I read the FT say for like the information I need, and that's still super interesting, but sometimes it's nice to have that sort of bit on the side that's a bit softer, it's a bit easier, like you've got a video that's a little bit lighter, like that kind of thing. It's nice, it is. And I always think that with like Instagram or anything like that, even if you help one or two people, like, I still think that's a massive achievement.
Yeah. And it's bite-sized, isn't it? I think when you're so kind of getting information from every source like possible, like I'm really I find like sitting through documentaries so hard, mainly probably because of my job, because I'm sitting there like constantly surrounded by information and just stuff from everywhere, that when I'm watching TV, I really want to be watching something that doesn't require me to do much except sit there. Like, I don't want to think about it. And my husband gets really frustrated because he's like, you never want to watch documentaries. But I think it is this thing where I'm like, I need it in bite-sized information. Like, if I see a little thing about, Seaspiracy on Instagram, I'll read it and I'll remember it. If you make me watch an hour documentary about it, I'll probably won't remember any of it because my brain will just shut up after a while. So yeah, that's kind of, I think the bite-sized angle is what we're trying to promote through that.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially in that topic area as well, I think it's really helpful to people because most people haven't had any financial education. I know I didn't before I entered this industry. Definitely. I was taught nothing at school, which is just crazy. And I think it is getting better. I've heard that like things are starting to be taught in schools slightly, not as much as they should, but little bits are. But it is absolutely nuts. And a second ago, you did touch on the advice gap, and I'm sure this is something, well, I know I've heard you speak about it before, and I know you must read and write about it all the time. So I'd love to know your thoughts, and also I don't know what you see the future looking like, really.
Yeah, no, I think the advice gap, I think is a very real thing, and it scares me to think about. I think the money that's about to be inherited by people who kind of may or may not know what to do with it is worrying, because it's kind of money that, their parents or grandparents or family members or friends or whoever they're inheriting it from have worked so hard for, and it's almost going to be landed in someone's lap, and then they may not know what to do with it, and it will just lose value because of that fear of not knowing what to do with it. And, kind of like I mentioned, like, it's an area that I particularly find interesting, mainly obviously because of work, but even outside of work, because I speak to my own family members who really don't know what they're doing with it, and they'll be talking to me about it, and I'm like, oh my God, like, you're in your 40s and you haven't thought about this, or you haven't thought about that. And it's scary to think about that. These are your family members and they haven't thought about protection needs. Now they have a kid, or they haven't thought about this. And all those things are so important. And the saddest thing is that we aren't taught it at school. So that's the biggest problem. If we were taught about it at school, we would kind of have a little bit of an understanding, but we're not. And I think also the fact that obviously those that may want to get advice, or maybe like, oh, you know what, I'd like to consider it, can't, because of this kind of shortage of advisors. And that's causing obviously a bigger issue, because the shortage of advisors means that it's a supply and demand issue. And so there's just so much more that I feel like needs to be done in this space and in the industry as a whole. And I mean, obviously, like I said, we're trying to do that through this Making Financial Sense page and just do our bit, but there's nowhere near enough, I think, what needs to be done. And it does need to be, I think, like a government push or something that the country is doing, so that we can kind of get people to where they need to be. So yeah,
that's so true. I've never thought of it like that. It does really need like an actual from the top, a great big sort of push or some sort of thing brought in. And I'd love to know your thoughts on sort of, we mentioned earlier that there is sort of like a younger generation, or the next generation, I suppose, of individuals coming into financial planning, whether that's advisors, planners, in any roles. Lots of apps that are appearing, and the world is sort of changing. And just what you think of that, really, and what you think it might mean for, I don't know, again, the future, sort of like this younger generation coming in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's great. As a young person myself, I think it'll be amazing to kind of speak to kind of advisors that are in the same space, or kind of understand a bit more about how it's changing and how they're kind of, speaking to clients and how they're adapting and stuff. And I mean, I'm a big advocate of it. My husband, obviously this year, like you mentioned, started taking the exams, and he was previously an area sales manager, and decided to kind of have a career change, but was on the fence about what he wanted to do. And I just showed him to the big, exciting world of financial advice. And I just kind of explained to him what the role was. I said, there's a gap in the market. There is a need for more young people to come in. And he's a people person, not the kind of person that can do like a 9-to-5 office job. He likes to kind of be speaking to people on the go. And I just felt like this role was great for him. So I obviously told him, why don't you sit the exams? But I think there is kind of another need of advisors or kind of big advice firms at least to be going to schools and careers fairs at universities. And I'm sure some are already doing it, but I just feel like that I didn't experience anything like that when I was at university. I don't recall seeing a financial advisor stand. Like, I didn't even know what a financial advisor was until I started in this industry. So yeah, I just think like it's something that is really needed. And I just feel like, again, it has to be a kind of industry effort rather than, you know, one or two people doing it here and there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, and all my friends still, if I meet someone new and they're, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, financial advisor or financial planner, whatever you want to call it. They either look at me like, God, you must be boring, or they look at me like, I have no idea what that means. And no one ever does. Ever. Yeah. It's never and the only reason I got into it is because my dad did it. And you find that, I'm sure you've had many conversations like that. The younger generation, the next generation who are financial advisors, financial planners will say their parents are. So there's so many of them.
Because that's what they know it. So it's okay. Like for my husband, my father-in-law has a financial advisor, and he kind of has done this like family plan. So him and his sisters are kind of all have this financial advisor, but they never speak to him and they don't really know much about him. And I think it's interesting that he kind of knows the value of a financial advisor because he's seen his dad have one or has one. But for example, like my dad doesn't have one, and I found it so bizarre because I was like, oh, you don't have a financial advisor and you're doing all right. So, you know, what's the need? But obviously the value of advice is kind of so big that you almost don't know because you're not taught about it. It's not a profession you hear about. And so all of a sudden when someone says, oh, you should get a financial advisor, you're like, why would I do that? I can just Google it or whatever, which is what I hear a lot of people saying. Mm-hmm. So I think it is one of these things where it's kind of not something you've come across either through family or friend. You almost don't know about it, which is half the problem, isn't it? So
100%. And I always find my clients that come to me, they always say that they've tried to do it themselves, they've looked online, which is great because there's so much on the internet, but actually it's quite overwhelming. Yeah. And there is so many different people telling you to do so many different things that in the end you just think, oh, I've actually got no idea. Yeah. And I need someone else to tell me.
And you almost don't want to make the wrong decision. Like I just was in the process of buying a flat, and I was kind of unsure of, you know, where to look for a mortgage and do all of these things. And because I'm in the industry, I went to a mortgage advisor and was like, hey, I'd like a mortgage. Can you help me? But one of my friends who's also in the process of buying a house was like, oh, but why did you go through like an advisor? Why didn't you just like go to Barclays or something? And it was a bit kind of scary doing. I was like, well, what if you kind of get rejected? What if your mortgage doesn't go through and you sort of then are going to find it even harder to get a mortgage? And all these things were kind of red flags in my head. But obviously to her, who's not in the industry, it was like, I don't see why you'd pay someone to do that. And I think, it's making it clear what that value really is and filtering out what's on the internet. There is so much, so it is overwhelming. You do kind of need an expert like yourself to kind of be like, this is what you need to do. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I find most people just want to be told what to do. They just want to say, here you go, you deal with it. Yeah, like you do with other things, all sorts of things. You know what I mean? You would rather not do it yourself. You'd rather, like, you're not going to build, well, some people might build their own house, but I'm not going to build my own house. So I'd rather go and pay somebody else to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. So you joined the Financial Times in May this year. When I was younger, I have the most vivid memories. As like I said, my dad's financial advisor, and when we used to go to Turkey on holiday, he used to wheel me in my pushchair down to, I was quite big at this point, I'm not sure why I was in a pushchair, but wheel me down to the shop and buy a Financial Times. And I remember it so vividly. And he doesn't read it as much now. When I was younger, he used to read it all the time. Because obviously there's a lot online now, Financial Times wise. And I always thought growing up, like, that would be like so cool. Like it would be so cool to work for Financial Times, FT. So when I realised you worked there, I was like, that is really cool. So I just want to know for my own personal knowledge, is it that cool to work there?
It is cool. I mean, we have a cake trolley that goes around the office, which is really cool. So I don't think it gets much cooler than that, to be honest.
No, it doesn't. I'm ready to quit now.
But it is cool. But I think, being part of the FT group is great. I mean, it's something I always kind of aspired to do. And I think personally as well, there are always kind of training opportunities available and talks and stuff, from people more senior than you that are kind of giving up their time to do these sessions and just better you in your career. And I think because you can kind of get this help in different aspects of your role, it's a great place to go. I mean, I've only been there since May, but I do really enjoy it. So that's good.
And it's so important, stuff like that, like the opportunity to learn and hear from other people. And I think it counts for so much when you're in a job and you do want to maybe move around or go further or move up, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So going on to talk a bit more about your career. So I always like to ask people what the most important lesson they have learned in their career.
Probably that there is no such thing as a stupid question. I think that is probably
so true.
Yeah, it's the thing is, it's like a double whammy, I guess, because as a journalist, our main job is to ask questions, obviously, and it's weird actually being on the other end of this in the podcast because it would usually be the other way around. But I guess when you first start out somewhere new or kind of in a new industry or a new job in any kind of space, there is this fear of kind of taboo or like you can't really ask a stupid question. And I feel like we all kind of everyone needs to embrace the fact that everyone is different. And therefore, there is no such thing as a stupid question. And I think to you, it might seem like a stupid question, but to the other person, they might not even have an answer because it's such a good question that they don't have an answer to it. So, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned. And I think I learned that the hard way because when I started at Portfolio Advisor, obviously I didn't know anything. And so when I would speak to fund managers who've been doing it for years and years and years, and they're talking to me in jargon, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm writing. And there were so many times that my piece had to be edited because I physically didn't understand what I had written. And so the editor or the news editor would read it and be like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't actually know. And they'd be like, well, why didn't you ask that person to explain it in kind of layman terms of like, what does this mean? And I guess it was that kind of nervousness of, but I don't want them to think I'm stupid and I don't know what I don't know what I'm writing about. But I think now, having got to a place in my career where I do feel like I understand the industry or as much as I can, it's kind of a lot easier for me to just call someone up and say, hey, I don't really understand what you mean by this. Can you please explain it? And I don't feel like it's stupid to ask that because I'd rather deliver that information in the best possible way than kind of be a bit on edge about it. And I think that applies to any kind of career or industry, not just journalism.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And it was quite nice as well to like having that example that you gave, because it's easy enough to say, isn't it? Like, no question is a stupid question. But when you hear it in a situation like that, it's really helpful. And like, I find in my role that my biggest fear would be somebody would ask me, like, so a client of mine would ask me like a really complicated question and I'd have no idea. It's like my biggest fear. And I've actually realised that by saying, actually, I'm not actually quite sure, can I just double check and let you know? They're like, okay, no worries. Like, do you think they're going to have a meltdown?
Yeah.
They couldn't care less. Like, they really could not care less. Like, they're happy for you to tell them next week and it's not a problem, but you forget. Like, you don't realise that in the time, do you?
No, exactly. And it's pressure that you put on yourself that you almost don't need to put on. And I think we're all human. I mean, you're not expected to know every single book that you've kind of been through inside out, back to back, cover to cover. Like, it's impossible, isn't it? There are going to always be things that you're like, I'd rather double check and give you an actual answer than kind of give you a half answer and not really answer your question. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So what would you say has been the biggest obstacle in your career so far?
That's a good question as well. So, I mean, okay, so probably it's a bit of a different answer to, I guess, what maybe other people would say. But for me, I think it's kind of being where I am right now, mainly because if I give some backlog. So I was born and brought up in London. My heritage is Indian, and background-wise, My parents are from East Africa, so they migrated to the UK years ago now, but and they moved here at quite a young age. But I think so. My dad was always fearful that I'd kind of struggle to get into a role in journalism, having not kind of seen many people that looked like us doing the role. And when I was deciding to become a journalist, it was the same. There were kind of women doing it, and that was obviously kind of something you would see a lot, but not many Indian women, from what I could see anyway. And that kind of put that, my dad kind of had a bit of fear and was like, oh, are you sure you want to do this? You know, are you sure, you know, what if you struggle to find a job? And it was a fear that I guess was somehow instilled in me, but also kind of I didn't want to accept. And it was worrying at first because the Indian community, as you may or may not know, is full of kind of professions of doctors and lawyers and accountants and pharmacists, and just like they're kind of all the standard careers that you see most people go into. And I was doing something out of the ordinary, and I just felt like there was so much more pressure to succeed because I was having a lot of people be like, oh, you know, she's doing journalism. Why didn't she do this? Or why didn't she do that? And I think that just made it even more of a reason to be like, I need to do this for myself. And thankfully, I didn't face many barriers. I did just keep pushing. But I think the biggest obstacle, I guess, was kind of a bit of an internal battle that I really could not afford to fail. And when I kind of realized I loved to write, I knew I had to try. But yeah, the biggest obstacle is, I guess, getting to where I am without having kind of my, I guess, background or culture or heritage as something that was pulling me back, which I think I'm quite grateful I didn't, but it was also, yeah, a bit of an obstacle. So a bit of a different answer, I guess, to maybe what other people would say, but that was one for me personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then my next question is always your biggest achievement. And it's probably, you kind of just said it, but I obviously want to hear it in your words. So what would you say is your biggest achievement?
Yeah, no, and I think it probably ties in quite easily with kind of the obstacle part, mainly because like now, like my dad is so proud. Like he goes around telling people, my daughter works for the FT. And it's really funny because, well, for me, it's quite nice, but it's quite funny because my sister's a doctor. And she's actually gone and done exactly what was kind of expected. And so it's nice that actually now when if my dad or my mom is kind of talking to someone, it's not, oh, my daughter's a doctor. It's like, oh no, Sonia works for the FT. And it's kind of seeing that shift, which is a weird achievement because it's not obviously directly linked to my career, because it's not in the sense that it's kind of an achievement that they seem to be proud of more. But yeah, that's probably the biggest one. And also the fact that I hated maths at school. So being a financial journalist is just something that I think I didn't think I would ever do, but so nor did my parents. They were like, what? But you can't even do percentages sometimes. Like what quick maths is just not your thing. So now I feel like my maths is so much better. And I think that's an achievement in some ways.
Oh, 100%. And I love that as well. I love that your dad goes around and says that my daughter works for FT. That's amazing. There is nothing quite like it, is there? When your parents say stuff like that, it really does. Because sometimes it's not the reason you do it, but I know I've been in situations where I'm like, actually, I'm going to push through just for my parents to say, yeah, you know what, Chanelle, like, we're actually proud of you. Like,
definitely. It does help.
Definitely. So if you could give one bit of advice to somebody starting out their career right now, sort of in the world of finance or just general career, what would it be?
Probably to read. So read everything. If you're kind of going into the world of finance, read the FT, read money books, read money blogs, and just try to kind of really grasp the industry that you're about to work in and understand what has kind of happened in the past, but also what people are kind of predicting for the future. I feel like that will kind of give you a good standing before you start to kind of go in and have a good idea. You're not going to be expected to know everything, obviously, but I feel like those are kind of great ways to just do things before you start.
Yeah, no, definitely. Amazing. And we are coming to an end now, but I'd love to ask you for a book or podcast recommendation if you've got anything for us.
Maybe one that people might have kind of already read, but The Secret by Rhonda Byron, I think her name is.
Okay, yeah, I know.
And yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely a big believer of the law of attraction. And I just feel like even now I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to where I am because I'm attracting it. And I mean, obviously some of it is also hard work. I'm not just going to like sit there and dream about something and it's going to happen. But yeah, I just find the book really kind of inspirational and just, really good.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one for like mindset as well. Like even if you just start doing it, I think you do notice a difference. And I have heard crazy stories about what people have apparently manifested. Some
honestly, it is amazing. And I'll just give an example, because for me, I do a vision board every year at the beginning of the year, and I have it up in my kind of little dressing room, so I see it when I'm getting ready subconsciously. Like, I think you're supposed to stare at it, but I don't do that. So I just see it when I'm doing my makeup or something. And it is amazing, because last year I had one on my vision board and I had put travel and adventure and like all this stuff, which obviously was a year of a pandemic, so nothing was going to happen. But somehow, when there was kind of a relaxed period, we had some time off, and me and my husband were like, should we just go on a Europe road trip? So we took 3 weeks and we drove around and we visited like 8 countries, and it was honestly amazing. And then we came back, and then there was kind of within a month another lockdown, so we picked the right time to go, and we traveled and we came back, and it was honestly crazy to think that we visited 8 places during a global pandemic year, like the year when nobody could travel, and we just drove and went. And I was like, this is because it was on my vision board. I manifested it, I think. So
yeah, that is pretty crazy. Like, if it wasn't of the year of a pandemic, I'd just think, well, fair enough, you just booked it. But because it was a pandemic year, that is pretty crazy. And I always feel like I manifested the dog, which hopefully you can't hear right now because he's scuffling around in the hallway. But I always wanted, so I worked full time in an office, always sort of kept thinking about working from home so I could get a dog. 6 months later, I got a job working from home. And I completely blagged it, because I'd never worked from home. And like sort of pre-pandemic times, if you hadn't worked from home, it was quite a hard bargain to get that. So got the work from home role and got the dog.
That's amazing, and he's adorable, so it must be the best companion to work from home.
I know, and I think we're ending this on a good time, because you guys at home can't see the camera, but he's currently got paws in the air rolling around the carpet, so clearly we're boring him. But thank you so much for coming on. You have been an amazing guest.
Thank you so much. It was so fun chatting.
Thank you so much for listening. If you did enjoy the episode, please do subscribe so you can be kept up to date and notified when the next episode is released, and also rate and review. We will see you next week.
Thanks, Chanelle. To catch all episodes in the Her Future Bright series, make sure you subscribe to the Money Marketing Podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and directly from moneymarketing.co.uk. Whether you've been an advisor for decades or if you're looking to start your journey, you'll find plenty of useful content on our website. To ensure you never miss out, sign up to our newsletters, register for our magazine, and give us a like or follow on Twitter and LinkedIn. We also hope to see you at one of our events later in the year. Until next time, goodbye.